This program is made possible in part by the Moving Image Trust Fund.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. If you look closely at the face, at the scalp of our guest, you will see scars. They are, some of them, more than a half century old. They were earned on a field of battle that our guest is concerned too many young people don't quite understand. He wears those scars like a medal. Representative John Lewis, Democrat of Georgia, Lion of the Movement, thank you very much for being with us. We are here in the Ron Robinson Theater, courtesy of the Central Arkansas Library System. It will soon be 1/2 century since you and a group of mostly pretty young and quite brave people crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama. And now Mr. Lewis has, interestingly, this is how you begin a new book, a new approach to education in the civil rights movement, recording the history of the civil rights. March, book 1, soon to be followed by two other volumes. Why did you decide to start there, sir?
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. We wanted to tell the story, to make it simple, to make it plain, to make it clear to another generation of young Americans and young people around the world, to understand how and why, and to do it in a graphic form with my co-writer and an unbelievable illustrator, Nate Powell, from the state of Arkansas, from Little Rock.
Incidentally, Congressman, they will be joining us in the second part of our broadcast, too.
Well, I tell you, these two young men are so gifted. They're able to tell the story with words, but also through the work of art. When I was growing up as a young child in rural Alabama during the 40s and the 50s on a farm, my father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. We raised a lot of chickens, and it was my responsibility to take care for the chickens. I wanted to be a minister. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, and they would help make up the audience, the congregation. And we would preach to the chickens. And when I look back, some of these chickens would bow their heads, some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I would preach to during the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. But Nate Powell, in this book, March, is able to draw and make those chickens come alive. So sometime during a book signing, he would sign the book first. And Andrew Aydin, the co-writer, would sign second. And I would sign last, and by the time the book get to me, it's a little chicken, and the chicken is saying amen.
Well,
but he has the ability to draw a lunch counter with young people, black and white, sitting together at a lunch counter, being beaten. Draw us walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge on March 7, 1965, in such a dramatic way. And he tells the story that was just marching in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion, trying to make it from Selma to Montgomery, to dramatize to the nation and to the world that people of color wanted to register to vote. And he showed what happened on that bridge. We have a right to protest, as Dr. King would say, for right. But after the commander of the Alabama State Troopers and the major said, "This is an unlawful march, will not be allowed to continue. I gave you 3 minutes to disperse," and return to your homes or to your church. One of the leaders along with me, a young man named Jose William, said, "Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray." The major said, "Troopers, advance." And you saw these guys putting on that gas mask. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks and bullwhips, trampling us with horses, and releasing their tear gas.
You knew, or you had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen if you continued, and you went anyway.
Well,
all of you.
We all kept walking in an orderly, peaceful fashion. I thought we were going to be arrested and taken to jail. I was wearing a backpack before it became fashionable to wear backpacks. And in that backpack, I had 2 books. I wanted to have something to read in jail. I had 1 apple and 1 orange. I wanted to have something to eat. Now, 1 apple and 1 orange wouldn't last that long. And I had toothpaste and toothbrush. And we kept walking, and we kept walking, and they started beating and trampling us. But we had to. We couldn't turn back. We couldn't let the threat of violence stop a nonviolent campaign.
The Pettus Bridge happened. I was tempted to begin by asking if you'd been arrested lately.
Well, a few.
Your first one was in 1960, and you've demonstrated over and over again you're not afraid to be arrested.
Well, to be arrested, at least the first time I was arrested, I felt free. I felt liberated. I felt like I had crossed over.
And that's, by the way, in March, too. That's recorded in the first volume here.
It's there, showing me being arrested, going to jail for the first time. My mother, my father, my grandparents, when I would ask them about those signs that said white and colored, white men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting, they would say, "That's the way it is. Don't get in trouble, don't get in the way." But when I heard about Rosa Parks in 1955, heard about Little Rock in 1957 at the age of 17, heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on the radio, it inspired me to find a way to get in the way. And I got in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And I've been getting in ever since. A few months ago, I was arrested for the 45th time in Washington at the U.S. Capitol with 8 other members of Congress and 200 citizens trying to say to the Congress, bring forth a comprehensive immigration bill.
Your parents, going back to the book, sometimes described as a comic book, and I would be it's a graphic representation. There's some humor in it, to be certain, but it's pretty serious stuff all the way through. It's gripping.
It is serious. It's real. It is what happened and how it happened. Before we went on a sit-in, before we went on a march, we just didn't wake up one morning and say we're going to go and sit in at some lunch counter, or that we're going to march downtown or stand in at a theater. We studied. We prepared ourselves. Every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m., a group of students in Nashville, Tennessee, from Vanderbilt University, Peabody College, Fisk University, Tennessee State, American Baptist College, Meharry Medical School, we would come together and study what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India. We studied Thoreau and civil disobedience. We studied the great religions of the world. We studied what Dr. King was all about in Montgomery. And many of us grew to accept the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, as a way of life, as a way of living.
Your parent, the book depicts the great fear that your parents and their neighbors and so many older black Americans at that time had. They were fearful for you. They were fearful for themselves. They were fearful for their property. It was obvious that you were changing a country, and there was massive resistance, and it wasn't all legal either.
People were afraid. Many people were afraid. People were almost afraid to be afraid. They didn't know what was going to happen. They've heard, they've read, but there have been beatings, killing, homes have been bombed and burned, churches have been bombed and burned, synagogues have been bombed, and my generation of young people came together and said enough is enough, and it's time for change.
You were an apostle of nonviolence, along with the leadership, most of the leadership anyway. But some of your colleagues or would-be colleagues discovered they could not be nonviolent. They could not share. They couldn't take the abuse, physical, verbal, whatever, and not fight back. Were you tempted? Did you ever come close to losing it during the sit-ins, the demonstrations in the Iraq?
During my entire participation and involvement in the movement, I never thought, I never even dreamed of fighting back. Early on, I accepted the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, as a way of life, as a way of living. It's one of those immutable principles. You have to come to that point where you respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. And we were taught to think of the opposition or the oppressor as a little baby, as a little child been born into this world. We don't come putting people down because of their race or their color or nationality or their gender. Our environment create that. So in the religious sense, and I don't want to be so religious about it, but in keeping with our faith, in keeping with the great tradition of our faith and I believe, there's a spark of divine, there's a spark of divinity in every human being. And we don't have a right to abuse that spark. You have to respect that. And Dr. King taught us to believe in this idea of the beloved community. Believe in this idea that we could redeem the soul of America. And in the process, all of us will become brothers and sisters. And in March, as well as in my early book, Walking with the Wind, I speak a great deal about being one house, one family, that we all live in the same house. And it's not just the American house, but it's the world house. And as Dr. King would say over and over again, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish as fools. And Gandhi put it another way. It is nonviolence or non-existence.
How close, Congressman, are we to living in that house?
We've made so much progress. We're coming closer and closer every day. Every so often there's some setbacks. Every so often there's some interruption. But we're headed in the right direction. And we will get there. I truly believe that in America, we will move to that point where we create a truly multiracial, multicultural, democratic society that will serve as a model for the rest of the world.
Is it fair to well, let me ask you, is there concern on your part that that young people, and I suppose particularly young people of color, do not have the appreciation for what you and your generation went through? Are we losing that sense of history?
Well, one reason I think we wanted to do a book like March and put it in this form, the form of a graphic novel. It is so simple and easy to read, but not just for young people of color, but for all young people, and people not so young.
Well, an aging white guy found it pretty compelling, I have to tell you. I kept turning the page.
Well, we want people to know what happened, how it happened, to be inspired, so we will not repeat the past. And you know, there are people in America today, they're black, they're white, they're Latino, they're Asian American, Native American, so we haven't made any changes. And I just feel like saying from time to time, come and walk in my shoes. I will show you changes. The signs that I grew up seeing, those signs are gone. And they will not return. And the only place that we'll see those signs today will be in a book, in a museum, or on a video. And there's someone that told me during my days of involvement in the movement, getting arrested, going to jail, marching from Selma to Montgomery, marching on Washington with Dr. King and hundreds and thousands of others, that I will live to see a man of color as President of the United States of America. I would say, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. You don't know what you're talking about. And I think the day will come and I think it will come very soon, that we will see a woman as president. We will see a Latino. We'll see an Asian American. American is changing, and we're helping people around the world to change. When I travel abroad, I hear so many people, and not just young people, middle-aged, older people, people in government, in business, saying they were deeply inspired by the civil rights movement in America. They follow it.
Well, we now have, as you know, we now have a president of color, and yet the country seems so riven, so polarized, and much of it, rightly, wrongly, fairly, or no, seems to stem from the fact that a man of color sits in the Oval Office with a strange-sounding name. Is that discouraging, or does that just steal you?
Well, it made me wonder and think harder and stronger that we have work to do, that we cannot give up, we cannot give in. We have to continue to pursue the dream of one America, one family, one house. And it would happen.
You work now and by the way, you've sat for Georgia's 5th district, I believe, for almost 30 years now.
Well, I'm serving my 28th year in the Congress. The people of Georgia, black and white, and Latinos, and others, men, women, they've been very good to me.
You work in a chamber that is now dominated by members of the opposition party and individuals of varying points on the ideological spectrum. Do you see it in Congress, or is there a greater level of acceptance of cooperation among members, or is the situation as stark, the differences as stark as we perceive them to be?
I think part of the problem in the Congress is pure politics. It's because when I travel other parts of America, I tell you, arriving in Little Rock at the airport, it was amazing to me, so amazing. So many white citizens came up saying, thank you, welcome to Arkansas, welcome to Little Rock. So thank you. When I go to Alabama, to my native state, I've traveled through Georgia, other parts of the South, I've had so many people walk up and say, I want to apologize for what we did, for what we said. I think here in this region, in spite of what you might see happening in the Congress, in spite of some of the people that have been elected, the great majority of the people prepared to lay down the burden of division, the burden of separation, the burden of race.
They were your associates in the movement, the King, Abernathy, the other giants of the movement. And yet in your earlier book, your autobiography, you lamented, I believe I'm quoting you correct, or paraphrasing correctly, you lamented that the movement that you knew in the 50s and the 60s and I suppose the early 70s had changed. Its energy had somehow dissipated or was fractured in a way. Where is it today, the movement? I mean, is there a movement?
There's still a movement. Other people are emerging, young leaders, and they're not just African American. Young white leaders, young Latino leaders, young Asian American, young Native American, and they would be the leaders of the 21st century. I'm not worried about the leadership. I think we lost so much during the 60s when we lost President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Dr. King. And I think something died in America. Some of that sense of hope, that sense of possibility. And we have to rebuild that sense of hope. And that's what I hope March would do. Say, we can do it. Don't get lost in the sea of despair. Don't become bitter. Don't become hostile. Keep the faith and keep pushing. That the struggle is not a struggle that lasts for a few days, or a few weeks, or a few months, or a few years. It's not just one lifetime. It's an ongoing struggle to redeem the soul of America.
Not to draw too fine a political point on it, and certainly not to give the North a free ride, but much of the disputed or the clash of ideologies seems starkly regional these days. You have the South, you have the Plains, portions of the Midwest, and then you have the rest of the country, and they just butt heads constantly. You can see this in the red state, blue state dynamic at work in presidential election, congressional elections, state house elections. Is this inevitable? Will we get through this?
As a people, we would make it. We would survive. We'll get through it. We're not going to fight any other battles in terms of wars. It's going to be ideas, but we would get. America is changing. People are changing, and in the end, I think we're going to laugh about the period we're going through. So why did we make so many mistakes? Why did we make these blunders? Why did we just say, come, as Lyndon Johnson was saying, as people of old said, just let's come together and reason together. Let's build the beloved community. Because we're one people, one family, one house. We all live in an American house.
Do you fear our politics today?
I think today, more than anything else, we need...
Not just our politics, Congressman, excuse me, but our rhetoric, the level of rhetoric, the anger, the distrust, the dissent, the unease.
I just think something has happened in the psyche of America, maybe in the American psyche. We're afraid to say, I'm sorry. Afraid to apologize. Afraid to say, I love you. How you doing, brother? How you doing, sister? I see members of Congress on the other side of the aisle, and I said, how you doing, brother? How was your weekend, sister? What's wrong? I've had, in recent weeks, governors, former governors of the South, present police chiefs and others to come up and say we were wrong, what we did. One of the men that beat me and my seatmate and left me bloody and unconscious at the Greyhound bus station in Rock Hill, South Carolina on May 9, 1961, had been a member of the Klan, came to my office in Washington with his son. His son had been encouraging his father to do it. And he said, Mr. Lewis, I want to apologize. I'm sorry. He said, I love you. His son said, I love you too. They gave me a hug. They started crying. I started crying. But that's reconciliation. It's possible for us to lay down the dark past and move ahead. And I think the South can teach people a lesson. Today in America, you see hundreds and thousands of young people coming south to study the civil rights movement. I know they come to Little Rock. They go to Birmingham and Montgomery and Selma and other points of the South. And there are people from all over the world. How do you do it? Why do you do it the way you did it?
The gap that remains between, in several indices, between achievement levels, for example, African American kids and white kids, income disparities, housing disparities, obviously a continuing cause of concern to you and your colleagues in the caucus.
But we need a Congress, and we need political leadership at all levels, not just at the national level, but at the local level, the state level, to make that commitment. And that's not just political leaders, but business. We need to see that all of our young people, all of our children receive the best possible education. Education is the key to unlocking so many doors, really. And we got to have comprehensive immigration reform. It doesn't make sense to have millions and millions of people living in a shadow. To have little children with their family growing up in fear that somehow, in some way, they're going to be deported. The kids come here 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years old. The only place they know. That's not right. It's not fair, and it's not just. And history will not be kind to us. You know, we all come from someplace else except Native Americans.
Is there hope in the near term for him? I mean, he seems jammed up, and we're recording our program in an even-numbered year, which means it's an election year, and a lot of members are staring down.
I am very hopeful, very optimistic that we're going to get a comprehensive immigration bill before the end of the year.
It frustrates even your Republican speaker. You can't.
Well, I share his frustration. We have to do it. It's the right thing to do. History will not be kind to us. What we need is courage at all levels, the local level, state, and the national level. We need men and women with raw courage. Don't be afraid.
Congressman, thank you very much for this time. This concludes our over-the-air portion of our broadcast, but if you will stay tuned, go to the internet, go to the website. We're going to bring on to the program a couple of Mr. Lewis's colleagues, his associates on this book, March, Volume 1. Congressman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
This program is made possible in part by the Moving Image Trust Fund.